Good evening, one and all. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the World Human Sciences and Management Conference 2021-22. This is Rudranaran Das, Executive Director, Center for Adivasi Research and Development. We are proud to announce that this conference is conducted along with Indian Institute of Management, Sambalpur, Central University of Odisha, Koraput, and Ravenshaw University, Cuttack. I welcome our speaker for today, Professor Jatin Srivastava, and participants across the globe through Facebook and YouTube Live, and who are here to present, to listen Professor Srivastava. The broader theme of this conference is agnotological context, disciplinary practices of social sciences, and policy frames. On behalf of Center for Adivasi Research and Development, I extend my profound gratitude to our patrons, Professor Dr. Sanjay Kumar Nayak, respective Vice Chancellor, Ravenshaw University, Professor Mahadev Joyswal, Director, Indian Institute of Management, and Professor Sarath Kumar Palita, Vice Chancellor, Central University of Odisha. The convener of this largest virtual conference are eminent Indian historian, Professor Chandi Prasad Nanda, and eminent policy activist, writer, and philanthropist, Mr. Charudat Panigrahi. The main outcome of this conference is to come up with the national and international framework for the education system in future. The crux of this conference will be the use of digital technologies such as artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and virtual reality that is being increasingly adopted after the outbreak of COVID pandemic. We hope this conference will help students, faculties, researchers, and all to expand their mental horizon and help the education system to adopt the best. Ladies and gentlemen, our center is a leading research-oriented institution promoting ethnographic, empirical, and evidence-based research for engaging and addressing the challenges that 21st century globe is facing today. The prime agenda of this institution is to come up with potential policy solutions for social change while believing in the idea of debate, dialogue, discussion, and with expertise, experiencing, and education. The institution focuses on marginalized communities and works for their livelihood to protect the nature, culture, language, and identity in particular. The age of modernity has witnessed that change is the only constant phenomena for societal purpose to enhance knowledge. Our information work for them is methodical and avoids paradoxically frameworks which is neglected so many centuries from theory to become practice. The Center for Adivasi Research and Development sincerely believes in the concept of social marketing, which is seriously looking for non-profit marketing and builds new social entrepreneurship for check and balance mechanism to glorify generations to come. Center for Adivasi Research and Development come to serve with the holistic approach of critical thinking in education to fill the gaps and plan accordingly for the voiceless communities. Dear friends, in today evening, we have with us Professor Jatin Srivastava. Professor Srivastava is an associate professor of E.W. Scripps School of Journalism at Ohio University. He is also the director of the Institute for International Journalism. His teaching experience ranges from graduate seminars in mass communication theory and research methods to undergraduate courses on graphics design and media literacy. His research is rooted in theory-based exploration of the new media environment. Welcome, Professor Srivastava, to World Human Sciences and Management Conference. Your topic is, as suggested by you, is global politics and new media environment. Now, without taking much time, I would like to invite Professor Srivastava to initiate his talk. Over to you, Professor Srivastava.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and thank you for inviting me here. I would like to thank the patrons of this event, conveners, and the conceptualizers, especially Vikramji. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for planning this event, and everyone else, in the thematic committee, and everyone else who has worked to make things work. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Now, the topic that I'm going to talk about is slightly, it's slightly different. But what I wanted to talk about was something that is more in line with what more in line with the theme of the conference. So essentially the idea of why fake news works, right? A lot of times you come across information that is not true. You come across disinformation in our societies and misinformation. And even then, things that would seem to be, easy to identify as untrue are often accepted as truth by people, by groups, by communities. So I want to talk about that, and yes, there would be a bit of discussion about international politics and international examples, but we will focus on the theoretical aspects, and we will look at examples from different areas, from different walks of life. Okay. So let's start talking about it. Remember, when we are talking about disinformation, when we are talking about fake news, it's something that's happening in everyday life, right? It's like me and you talking. It's like me talking to my friends and believing some things and not believing some things. It's just that a lot of times disinformation comes through media channels. More specifically, a big part of the disinformation or fake news we come across comes from social media. Okay. So we will talk about different aspects of that. So when we think about information and what makes us believe it, right? So there are three kind of major areas we can look at, right? So one is source factor, who the information is coming from. The second is message factor, right? So what the information is saying. And the third is audience factor. How do audience process the message? Okay. And so let's start with source factor. When I was growing up, there would be many stories my grandfather would tell me. And many of these stories came from Ramayana and Mahabharata. And in Ramayana, there is this instance, right, where Sita ji is, is in the forest, and the Ravan is there, and Ravan is dressed up as a, as a sannyasi. Now there is the Lakshman Rekha, and Lakshman has asked Sita not to cross it, whatever happens, but Sita crosses it. Why? What made her cross the Lakshman Rekha? Right? So that was one thing. So what was it about Ravan that made Sita cross the Lakshman Rekha? And that's one thing. The second example is from Mahabharata. So during the war, there is this time where so Dronacharya is very powerful warrior and he's unbeatable, and during this whole war, they kill an elephant. The name of the elephant is Ashwathama, and Ashwathama is also the name of Dronacharya's son. So they start making this noise that Ashwathama is dead. Ashwathama is dead, and Dronacharya, he doesn't ask anyone else. He goes to Yudhishthir. He points towards Yudhishthir and asks him, "Is what happened?" And Yudhishthir says, Ashwasthama hato na naro va kunjaro. So Ashwathama is dead, and that he says in loud voice, but the rest of the thing he says in a meek voice, in not that loudly. So Ashwathama is dead, but he was not man, he was an elephant. Okay. Dronacharya thinks that his son Ashwathama is dead, and he drops his weapons, and Drishtadyumna gets the chance to kill him. Okay. Now, in this situation, there is another thing, right? So why did Dronacharya ask only Yudhishthir? He could have asked anyone. He could have asked, some of the Kauravas. He could have asked, anyone. But he asked Yudhishthir. Okay, and in these two situations, there are two people, Sita and Dronacharya, which believed information that was not true. But their decision was based on certain factors. Okay? And if you think about these factors, these they were evaluating the credibility of the source. So they were saying, all right, because this person has said so, this must be true. So Sita thought that, all right, so there's the sannyasi, and sannyasis don't lie. They are pious people, they are sacred people, and therefore I should believe it. Very similar to, if you get a message which says that a doctor at All India Institute of Medical Sciences says that, you're more likely to believe medical information that is attributed to someone from the medical fraternity or a medical expert. Okay. Similarly, in the second case, Dronacharya believed in Yudhishthir's truthfulness more than anyone else's. He knew that whatever happens, Yudhishthir is not going to lie. And so he trusted Yudhishthir rather than anyone else. So it was the credibility of the individual, right? So very much like, if you have, I don't know, if you have an uncle who is an expert and who you respect a lot, and he shares a message with you, about something that he does, it is very likely that you might believe him, or you are more likely to believe him. Okay? So these two examples show you how source credibility works, or how in certain situations source credibility may make you believe messages which you wouldn't otherwise believe. So essentially, it's not what is being said, but it's who is saying it, right? And that becomes a very important factor. A lot of times we trust, we believe people we know, we believe people in our communities who we trust to make decisions about certain issues, about certain topics. And remember, the history of this thing is not, of this thing is very interesting, or this idea in communication and media research that people believe other people, right? So if you look at early 1900s, there was a very dominant belief that media has very strong power over people, right? That people believe whatever comes from media, and you would have heard the ideas or these names, magic bullet theory or hypodermic needle, which were essentially the idea that media messages come to people and influence them without any resistance. And that was a very prominent way of thinking about things, thinking about media influence. But as time progressed, especially in 40s, there comes this idea, which they later called two-step flow theory, right, or two-step flow model. Now, in this idea, what they did, so they did this study, right, and they were trying to study how people make their political decisions, how they make decisions about who to vote for and all those things. And they were thinking that, maybe it would be more about what programs they watch and those kind of things, more what programs they watch, what newspapers they read, what radio programs they listen to. And remember, television was not as big an influence in 40s as it later became. And they were surprised because a lot of people, when they would ask people, all right, how do you make your political decision? What do you watch? Where do you get your political information from? And they started noticing that a lot of people were not saying that we are getting our information from mass media. They were saying that we are talking to other people. We get our information from other people. And so there comes the idea of opinion leader, that people in the community who who people talk to make decisions. Now, for different things, opinion leaders were different, right? So it might happen that if you want to talk about budget and what it means for you, you may talk to your friend who is an accountant, right, or a chartered accountant. But if you want to talk about which car to buy, you might talk to someone else who owns a service center. Okay? So so that idea of opinion leadership, uh, it kind of became more relevant in the form of influencers in modern times. That is something that becomes a very important idea, especially in the social media times. So people, and we will use the term opinion leaders very, very loosely, but opinion leaders, what they were doing, number one, they were taking the information from the environment, from the media and from other sources, and they were processing it and communicating it in a way their communities could understand, or people who follow them could understand. They were also contextualizing the information. So, for example, if you are from a tribal community in Odisha, and and you see the national budget, and it's all wonderful, but you really don't understand how it affects your businesses or your practices, or how it affects your regions. How can you benefit from it? Are there any provisions that that will help you get better education, that will help you do things differently? And for that, a lot of times you turn to someone in your community, local leaders, local experts, and so on, professors at institutions like yours, and they interpret the information for your context. They tell you how the budget may provide solution to your problems. It may address your challenges. Okay, so in the social media time, a lot of times you are getting information from individuals, and many times there are individuals who have more influence than other people. Okay? So the individual mode of distribution of information, that becomes a very, very important factor. Okay? And we will focus on that part quite a bit. The second thing was message factors, right? So the nature of the message. Okay, a lot of times messages these days, especially if you're on social media, they can be targeted to your interest. And remember, one of the audience factor we are going to talk about is confirmation bias, is selective processing. So when you come across messages that are saying what you already believe, you are more likely to believe those messages, even if that message is not true, even if that is fake news. So, but we will come to that, when we are talking about audience factors. So, in the message factors, one of the things is message relevance, and social media these days, especially Facebook and Twitter, they can actually target you with messages that are related to your behavior. So, for example, if you like certain kind of messages on your feed, if you post certain kind of messages, if you watch certain kind of ads, certain kind of messages that Facebook puts on your feed, they will give you more of that, right? So it is very it is very important to understand that if you have certain kind of beliefs, you might find more messages that are related to your belief, whereas someone else who has different kind of beliefs, he or she might find different kind of messages. Okay, so message relevance, message tailoring becomes an important factor in the social media environment, right? The second thing, and this is a very important thing, is the message queue. So a lot of times you look at a message and you say, all right, this is something that is trending on Twitter, on Facebook. This is something that has been shared by a lot of people. This is something that has been liked by a lot of people. Therefore, this must be true. And that is yes. In our everyday life, sometimes we say, okay, so if something is accepted widely by people and is supported widely by people, then that thing must be true. That thing should be true. However, in the social media world, sometimes a lot of other things might be going on. So, for example, number one, people might not be paying full attention to messages before liking them or retweeting them. a lot of times they might come across messages where they are not completely sure that it's true, but they share it anyway. Okay, and the other person who looks at the message thinks that that because it's coming from that person, it must be true. So let me give you an example. So I know someone very close to me in my family who when the COVID-19 started, during the early days, there were a lot of rumors, a lot of information about what you should do, what you can do to address COVID, and there was this information that was doing the rounds, that if you keep elaichi and kapoor, so cardamom and camphor with you, and these are considered very to have great medicinal values. So if you keep them with you, it will save you from COVID related infections. Okay. Now this person I know, she's my mother. So my mother was so she would get these things, messages on WhatsApp, and she would share them. Sometimes she would just be talking to people, and she would say, oh well, I've heard that that kapoor and elaichi, or cardamom and camphor, works. Now my mother herself, my parents were in Lucknow. They were taking very strong precautions. They were not, no one was coming to our house. They were not going anywhere. Even when they were shopping, someone would bring the grocery and leave it outside the home, inside the gate, and it will be there for some time, and then they will go and pick it up. So all that was happening. But so cardamom and camphor was something which they were not using, right? But when she told someone else, some other people, maybe, there is a chance that because they respected her, because they have known her for a long time, maybe they used it. Okay. And so, that, or those kind of behaviors, in a way, wouldn't have happened if she wouldn't have shared that information. So a lot of times people believe messages not because what messages are saying, but because who is sharing them. Now, one other thing that has become a very serious challenge in modern times is the idea of false balance. And this is, different from the cognitive side, different from how our brain works, but it is more about journalism practice and how journalism is practiced, and how journalists try to be objective, how journalists try to be just, right? So there's this idea of balance, right? So if you take one side, if you take interviews, or if you gather information from one side of an issue, you gather information from the other side of the issue to balance the issue. Okay. But in modern times, people found that with issues that were complicated, especially scientific issues like climate change and like vaccine use, especially in the Western countries, especially in United States, balance became a very complicated, a very debated topic. So what was happening, that let's say you are talking about climate change, okay, and people will go and talk to these scientists, and scientists have these expertise, and they have done these studies, they have collected the data. They are scholars and scholars and researchers, and they find that the scientists say that more often than not, right? So a majority of these scientists, and remember, that's how science works. A lot of times, for many issues, especially with social issues and awareness related issues, you rarely have 100% consensus. Right? But if you have the majority or a vast majority of experts saying that this is true, then there are reasons to believe that this is true, and that is backed by data, and that's based by backed by scientific evidence. Okay, so when we think about false balance, let's say in the climate change scenario, people, reporters or journalists will go to these people who were doing these studies for a very long time, who were collecting data, who were observing events, and then coming to their conclusion. And they found that a vast majority of scientists were saying that, yes, this is something that is happening. So climate change is happening. And number two, it is human activities are contributing to climate change. Okay. So those were the two things. But to maintain balance, they would go and they would talk to climate change deniers, right? Now, in this scenario, people who were denying climate change, a lot of times, many of them were not, researchers. They had not done detailed studies. They did not have scientific proof to back their ideas. They were just saying that, this doesn't seem like, this doesn't seem to be true. Or how is global warming happening when this winter is so cold? Or, this has naturally happened. There were years which were very warm and there were years which were very cold. There is no reason to believe that these are that this is happening because of human activity, right? So the journalists took comments and took information from these people and put them at the same level as the scientists, right? So essentially saying that, yes, well, see, the climate change is there, and the scientists are talking about climate change. Vast majority of scientists are talking about climate change, but there are these people too. But there is also this, this line of thought that says that climate change is a hoax or climate change is not true. Now, in this scenario, you are creating credibility for this group. Or journalists were creating credibility for a group which did not have much evidence to support their claims. And they were equating it in many cases with the scientific evidence. Okay. So that's something they call false balance. Now, in doing so, to follow the idea of balance, a situation was created or a situation emerged where expert opinion was equated with opinion or with the common sense opinion or with the emotional opinions. And, and it changed how society was looking at these issues. It changed how politicians were talking about these issues, how they were working on these issues. Okay? So these issues start becoming less severe. The same thing happened with the vaccine debate. So yes, the vaccine debate comes up, and there are clinical trials with COVID-19 vaccine, and people are saying that yes, this works, and governments say that it's important that as many people as can get vaccinated should get vaccinated. Okay? But then there are also people who say that we just don't believe in it. Now they don't have much proof, they don't have much evidence, but in the quest for journalistic balance, they were given the same platform as the scientific researchers. So false balance often creates this scope for doubt, which becomes very problematic, because it may make people question ideas or question information that is verified, that is researched, that is backed by evidence. And this information is questioned with information without evidence, often without much backing, okay, from scientific research. So these are some of the message factors which play important roles. The third thing is audience factors. Okay, so when audience receive these messages, when audience receive this information, a lot of times there are processes within their mind, within their information processing system, that may make them accept information that might not be true, right? So one of the ideas that has emerged in recent times as becoming very important is the idea of selective exposure and confirmation bias. So people pay more attention to, or people expose themselves to information which they believe confirms their viewpoint. So, for example, if I like certain ideas about, if I like a certain party, right, and there is a news channel that is very favorable to that particular party, I am more likely to, to consume information from that news channel. Now, it might happen that I consume information from other channels too, but a lot of times that information is to find fault with, with my oppositions, or see what they are doing wrong, rather than understanding what they are trying to say, so that I get a more complete picture of what's going on. Different perspectives, different takes on what's going on in our society. Okay. So that is the idea of selective exposure. That's the idea of confirmation bias. So selective exposure, essentially, people select information that they want to consume. Now, remember, this is the time of media abundance for most people. In our country, in India, there are a vast number of people, a big number of people who don't have a lot of media choices, who don't have access to media. But then there are a lot of people who are dealing with a very large number of media choices, choices on the internet, choices on on television, choices on print publications, blogs, and whatnot. And don't forget WhatsApp groups. Okay, so people make choices. People say, all right, I'll watch this channel, and I won't watch this channel, and this channel is useless, and this channel is is very meaningful, this channel is best. So a lot of times these ideas are shaped based on what you believe is right. Okay? And so what that does, that stops you from questioning content. So confirmation bias, if you come across something that matches your point of view, you think, yes, this must be true. Okay, so I'll give you an example. These days, when I measure my weight every day, right? And I'm trying to control my weight. And so sometimes when I climb on the scale, on the weighing machine in the morning, and I see that the weight has reduced, then I won't get, then I say, all right, so this is the reading. So this is what my weight is. But there are days when it shows that the weight has increased. And those days I do it, I take my weight multiple times to make sure that the reading is right. So when the machine told me that my weight is going down, I didn't question it. So when it said something that I liked to believe, that I wanted to believe, I didn't question it. But when it said something, or when it gave me a result that I didn't like, I tried to test it and retest it and verify it. And a lot of time that happens in public life too. When we look at information that is that goes with what we think, we just accept it. However, when we come across information that that doesn't support our views, then we say, all right, let's talk to other people, let's look at other sources, and let's and so on. So a lot of times we are more likely to be fooled by information that matches with our belief system, that matches with our predispositions, that matches with what we want to do. Okay. Now, so these were some of the major source factors, message factors, and audience factors. Okay. Now, if you look at some of the things that social media companies or social media has done to address these issues. So, for example, think about and I'm pretty sure that most of you use WhatsApp. So on WhatsApp, when someone forwards a message, on the top you get this forwarded label, and that label didn't used to be there earlier, in the early days of WhatsApp. So how does that help? That helps because it tells you that the person who forwarded it to you, this message is not coming directly from that person. That person probably got it from somewhere else. So when you say that, all right, so this is my friend, or this is Dr. Jena, and he's an expert, and he's telling me this, you don't look at it that you say, all right, so this is something that has been forwarded by Dr. Jena, but he's not exactly saying this. So essentially that, kind of it reduces the impact of the credibility of the sharer on the message, right? Similarly, if you notice, there was the, if some messages are forwarded very fast on WhatsApp, there is a limitation on how many messages can be forwarded within a very short time. Then then WhatsApp stops forwarding. And that again is to ensure that people do not get influenced by something just because it's forwarding very fast. Okay. Remember on Twitter, actually, they were using bots, and they still are using bots. So essentially, algorithms, programs, so fake profiles, which keep on retweeting and tweeting and retweeting certain hashtags to make them trend. Now, see, the bots are machines, so they can retweet very fast and they can tweet very fast. So if something is tweeted or retweeted very fast, then synthetically, even if it is not true, it shows as trending. And once it starts trending, it gets followers who are real people. They say, all right, so this is something that is trending. What does it mean? They look at it, they pay attention to it, they tweet it, retweet it, share it, and so on. Okay. And news media picks it up. News media, I'm starting seeing these stories in news media, or these, where they say, all right, trending news of the day, trending topic of the day, and so on. Okay. So if something trends, it gets a lot more attention, right? So that's the message factor of the bandwagon effect, that if you see that if you think that something is popular, that becomes more popular because, you are more likely to pay attention. So, so on Twitter especially, algorithms have been very effective in trending information that is not really being tweeted or retweeted by people, right? So, so that is something that that social media companies have done. So those were some of the things. Then there are flags where they say this information might be, this information is not verified, this information might be untrue, this information has been reported as a rumor, and so on. So social media has been trying to do different things, but a lot of times the focus is on making sure that information that is not good is not shared, or information that that is not coming from you is not attributed to you, so that people don't don't think that it's coming from this friend who I trust very much. They think that, all right, so this person has shared it, but he or she is not exactly saying this coming from somewhere else. Okay. So those are some things social media companies are doing. Another strategy to address this this disinformation or the spread of fake news or bad information is media literacy, right? So in media literacy, the idea is, or the wider perspective is, that you train people, right? People who are receiving these messages, who are processing these messages. So yes, so you can't probably regulate everything, you can't do everything, but very much like you train people to drive a car before they start driving a car, right? So the idea of driving license, right? So you say, all right, so cars are complicated machines, and if people don't know how to drive them right, they can get into accidents, and that can create a lot of problems. So we will make sure that people know how to drive before they get a driving license. Okay. Now, today's information environments are very complicated, and some people make the argument that that the same thing should happen in the modern media environments. So environments have become so complicated, there is so much chance of people meeting accidents and things going wrong, that you train people to understand fake news, to understand misinformation, disinformation, to understand how to handle their privacy, to understand how not to get attacked by viruses, how not to get fooled online, and so on. Okay, so that's the media literacy strategy. So an aware citizen will, so an aware citizenry, so aware people will decrease the chance of the effectiveness of fake news. And remember, if you and that may save you or society from a lot of problems, very similar to the way getting driving license and getting proper driving training may reduce the number of driving accidents, may reduce the pressure on police, may reduce the pressure on medical services, right? I don't know if you remember, but well, maybe most of you were not yet born, but in 80s, there were these campaigns on Doordarshan for early 80s, I think 85, 86, well, early to late. So there were these campaigns on literacy. So just Jan Saksharta in Hindi, where they would show, and one thing that I remember is where they would show how lack of literacy may create two other problems. So there was this example where a woman reads the medicine level. So she has to give medicine to her husband or a child, and she takes a pill from the poison, from the bottle of poison, rather than from the bottle of medicine, because she cannot read. And you look at it and you say, all right, so this is a big accident that's going to happen. Her family is going to get in trouble. With media literacy, there is a similar kind of strategy. Okay? And people say that, the best way is to, yes, maybe we can trust the social media companies, maybe we cannot. But the best way is to train people, right? But the problem there is that a lot of times, even people who are well-trained, they are being influenced by their own biases, their own political predispositions, their own social predispositions. Okay? So remember, all these strategies have some strengths, some weakness. And a lot of times the way they work is they work in combination. So you try, different strategies at different levels. Now, the third part, which people argue might work, is government action, right? So government action to control. So who monitors fake news? Do social media companies? So does WhatsApp? Is WhatsApp responsible for monitoring social media news, or is it the government, or is it both? Now, when you get government into the mix, then, well, one, it puts a lot of extra pressure on government resources. That when government is trying to control some information, or government bodies are trying to regulate some information, it is always being done, using certain principles, or it is not motivated by other kind of motives. So these are different kind of strategies that are being tried at different parts, in different parts of the world differently. Okay. Media literacy seems like a very prominent strategy. United Nations supports it. I believe a few weeks ago they had the International Media Literacy Week, and and they have specific initiatives devoted to that. So and I think media literacy also becomes relevant for us, for institutions, for professors which are teaching students, because that's one thing, because our responsibility is teaching. So that's one thing we are already doing. That's one thing we are already good at, regulating and regulating fake news is not our specialty. It's something that maybe government bodies will do, maybe law and order, maybe police, but we are not experts in that. Similarly, companies taking action, that's also not our job. We might contribute to companies' behavior and the government's behavior indirectly, right? By consulting them, or if they ask for our expertise, if they say, all right, can you help us figure this out? But otherwise, the most important, the most direct ways in which we can contribute is, essentially teaching our students, teaching our communities to be vigilant, to develop skills to understand disinformation and fake news. So with that, I would stop my presentation. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening to me. Please feel free to let me know if you have any questions. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Srivastava, for your very delightful insights. I would like to now invite Dr. Vikram Kesarijana to go for question and answer session.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Professor Srivastava, for very insightful and very deep kind of media understanding of your own, and in terms of pedagogical practices of new media is concerned. You rightly talked about more than 41 minutes, and you highlighted so many issues related from Ramayana, Mahabharata, leadership perspective, preposition of positioning, and how to deal with the data, artificial intelligence, environment crisis, global warming, everything, every aspect you can touch a little bit. And also finally, you rightly mentioned about this magic bullet theory. And I a little bit surprised when you are a fantastic media practitioner and rightly a academician of media who is basically taught and the main prime business of his media. You must, I think you should highlight something about usage gratification theory. But I don't know what kind of exercise running behind of your mind when you talked about this particular 21st century globe and this arena, which is represent the environment biases. You rightly mentioned about fake news and not news and what a news. And you amalgamation with these theories of new idea, what we can call it the jargonical word, grammarly word, or even hybrid language, if I'm not wrong. And quote unquote unbiased sources. Who is actual the owner of the media in 21st century globe? It's a very problematic when we have to sensitize all this data hijacking, and in terms of related to modernity, in terms of contemporary society. And you rightly mentioned, you started with this Ramayana and Mahabharata, what we call the represent of our society. And then the later on, you should convey yourself into the marketing perspective of a whole media world, and the perspective even itself very vibrant. Thank you so much. And it's really very wonderful and very insightful. Really, it's sense of gratitude from our side. Now, though, it's a Mapping Mind series of invitation to global dialogue. This is the time to start dialogue. Sir, I would like to know more about, you rightly mentioned about magic bullet theory. It was the Hebel's theory, and rightly the Hitler's arena, how he jumped into the German and the propaganda machinery was working in that time, particular 1939 to 1942, if I'm not wrong. Then what happened wrong with this magic bullet theory? If somebody said magic bullet theory was not working, perhaps that's why the media people and these pedagogical practitioners of media, they will bring a new solution for that. Is called usage gratification theory, right? Then what happened with this Anna movement? Once again, magic bullet theory happened in India, because you are Indian and you quite sensible information throughout all this scenario of 21st century globe, and this arena always belongs to the media people. Somebody rightly mentioned the 19th century belongs to USA and the 20th century belongs to Europe, and 21st century belongs to quote unquote triple media, right? And I would like to more of your information about this particular sense of time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bikramji. That's a very important question, actually. Now, remember, magic bullet theory has been debunked. So no serious researcher in modern time really believes in magic bullet theory. Now, one thing that I think is important to understand, that magic bullet theory was prominent in a time when there was not a lot of media. a lot of dramatic events. So a lot of times when you look at wars, when you look at times of hardship, uh, the opinions consolidate, right? People start believing in one thing, or there are these forces which say, all right, so we just talk about this thing, we don't talk about anything else. And it happens during times of crisis, national crisis, and all those kind of things. So yes, so magic bullet theory number one was completely debunked. No one no serious researcher in modern times actually believes in it. And there was this sense, right, that magic bullet theory was a mass media idea. It was a very exaggerated idea, And in modern times, you see this big change in our media environments where people have the ability to provide more feedback, to provide with to interact with the environment. So if if there is a YouTuber who is reaching millions of people, there are also millions of people commenting. There are also millions of people providing feedback through sharing it, through subscribing the channel, and so on. If there is a mainstream news channel that is providing some news, it is being discussed, it is being commented upon, and so on. So there are very few venues. So for example, let's say it's NDTV or Doordarshan, and they have a traditional media, but now it's almost impossible to find a venue where you don't have some degree of feedback. So NDTV or Doordarshan, they would have their Twitter, they would have other social media where people provide feedback and all those kind of things. So the idea of mass media in the society, that's a more modified idea. So it's so it's a more interactive media space. People are participating more, and so on. And like you said, it's the this century is the century of media. Yes, because media has become people, and people have become part of media. So in that way, that thing is there. And you very rightly said, did mention users and gratifications. So remember, users and gratification was the other side of the pendulum. So on one side, magic bullet ideas or hypodermic ideas, they said that, all right, so people have no power. And and then users and gratification is saying that, if you don't select the channel, if you don't tune into the radio, if you don't pick up the newspaper, how are you going to get exposed? So people have the ultimate power. People are deciding. So so there are two different extremes, but that I think was a very valid reference. Now, the ownership factors that you mentioned, they play a very important role, not only in India but across the world. In United States, for example, over a period of time, a smaller number of commercial organizations or companies own more and more media in United States. So majority of media is owned by a small number of companies in United States, and I think that probably is happening in India too, to some extent, right? India is a very diverse media space, a lot of languages, a lot of a lot of small units. So it's it's harder to control that way. But I believe that as times are progressing, we are seeing some companies becoming much bigger in terms of what they own, across states, across languages, and so on. And that is something that is a matter of concern when you think about diversity of voices. So if and it has been shown across the world that that ownership factors are an important factor. Owners of media companies rarely try to not influence the content or the functioning of these media organizations. So so that was a very important observation, Vikramji. So I think, yes, please go ahead. Your mic is not on.
Please, sir, continue.
So so I think that's all I had to say. So you were saying something.
Thank you so much, sir. And the second question for you today's night, sir, what wrong within India? The particular media pedagogy and the practitioners of media, in particular the universities and concern and the institutional as concern. Nobody taking seriously media and communication is the whole discipline still so far in India. What the USA President Kennedy said, the first and foremost very clever boy is called media boy in USA's theory. And what happened and what wrong with him? As the ever we have seen, Narada was the first communicator of the country. Narada was the first communicator of the planet. And then what happened with us? What wrong with these disciplinary practices? We don't have very specific spell out about the communication and media as a whole. Your answer, sir.
Thank you, Vikramji. That's a very interesting question. And I would say this, that we get disappointed very, very fast. There is nothing wrong with our media, with our media education. It's just a phase, right? We are growing. We are a country which started everything from scratch. We started when everyone else, when most developed countries were at, almost Western countries were at the peak of their powers. So we become independent in 1947. We have our constitution in 1950. So, and by that time, most countries were already, developed. So United States was in pretty developed state. UK, so they had, established media systems. Media systems were making money. All that thing was happening. But for us, we started then. So yes, so we are at a different phase of growth. Also, we went a bit differently, right? So we came from so we started with the socialist, the socialist democratic republic. So a socialist model where media was playing a very different role. And so we were, figuring a lot of things out. Then we changed, our economic philosophies in the 90s. We opened our media markets. And so it's only 30 years. And during that time, social media also comes, internet also comes. So, and remember, it disrupted education, media education everywhere. So now for us, we didn't have as much infrastructure, and maybe we never paid as much attention or as much importance to media education. We in the communities I come from, and I think across India, focus has always been on engineering and medical, and so when governments were so invested in developing AIMS and developing IITs, there was a very small degree of attention on how to develop institutions that that educate people about media, because in a democracy, media plays a very important role of informing people, right? And if you don't have informed citizenry, if you don't have informed people, how can you believe that they will make the right kind of decisions? Okay, so that's but now I see that happening. I see, the Indian Institute of Mass Communication. So that's the government, expanding those things, those institutions. And I think there's one in Odisha. There are a lot of other centers that are, like your center, which are coming up and which are doing great work. So it's happening. We are in a stage of development in India, and and there are professors, there are academicians that are trying to figure things out, and that's how it happens. It's if you give a cricket analogy, India won the first World Cup in 1983. Before that, they were not very good cricket wise, and then in next 30 years they became one of the most powerful countries in cricket. So I think this is the time when we are doing very significant things. We are starting to talk about these things. We are starting to think about these things. We have a very strong generation of professors coming up. And in this generation of professors, there is something very different. And that happened in the United States too. So early generations of media professors came from English professors or people who were trained in journalism practice, but not very well trained in academic research, right? So they were training people for professions. In India, our previous generation full of very strong journalists, very strong practitioners. But now we are starting to see those people also coming in who are experts in media research, and they are learning a lot of new things. So they are building the system, and I think that this generation, so your generation of professors, is going to be very important in how media education in India will evolve. So yes, yes, we started a bit late, and and sometimes things, it doesn't look like we are in a very good place, but I think we are doing very well, and we have every reason to be optimistic.
Thank you, sir. Third question for you today's night, sir. I would like to take some of your quotes when you talked about the unbiased and bias. When you start writing or something, take very seriously to do reporting, then you should listen that side and this side, then go for balance, because it's a balancing methodology. And what is the actual role of UNESCO? Always media is considering by UNESCO is a faithful and watchful dog, quote unquote, the faithful and this particular dog in terms of third world countries perspective. Media is still not a dog, and in media is a underdog, if I'm not wrong. Give some light on it, sir.
See, there is this idea of media being a watchdog. So or we can call it a prahari, a protector. So media is a watchdog that makes sure that that your representatives, so representative of people, the government, the leaders, the institutions, they are working properly, right? So it, and remember, in our culture, we often dog is seen as a very negative word, but the idea is essentially media is seen as someone who monitors the progress or the work of public officials, of representatives, of political actors. And so that's a very noble idea, right? Because the way system works in a democracy is that, so people elect their leaders, but how can they elect their leaders if they don't have the right information? Now, if there is public and there is the political leadership, yes, they can ask the political leadership information, but what is the guarantee that your political leaders are speaking the truth to you? And so you need someone who can verify the information from the political leaders, and that's where media comes in. And because their role is primarily of verification and communication, the idea of watchdog, that's the term they use. It's probably not a very nice term to use in some cultures, but that's where it is coming from. And I think this is a very important thing, for us to understand and to think about it. Use a different word if we need to, but the need for media to monitor the quality of information in the society is still there in all democracies, especially a democracy as complicated as the Indian democracy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And this is last question for today's night, because I know you are running short of time. Sir, without listening something from you and your words related to glamour and in terms of media world, what about your perceptions related to the glamour world? Today, After 75 years independent, we have not seen a single tribal boy to doing a great journalist. Not even seen a tribal girl in glamorized world, what you call it, the sensitized film world or whatever you call it, the mainstream media or even Bollywood or even Mumbai wala or something, what you can use, what your word is suitable for you. And then not ever seen a particular Dalit in quote unquote national media or mainstreaming the buzzword called cinema. And what kind of society we are leading on in 21st century arena, in post-pandemic truth world or post-truth sensational world? Your answer, sir, and give some light on it.
Thank you, Vikramji. And that's a question that is very, very, very important. Because we are a very diverse country, and we have a history where where some groups had more access to mainstream media, to the, let's say, corridors of power, and those have been challenges. And remember, there are a lot of minorities that have rarely been represented in the mainstream media. So we don't see a lot of Adivasis, or tribal people from tribal communities in our mainstream media. We don't see a lot of people from Northeast in the mainstream media, and so on. And those challenges are there, and I think those are very important challenges. But I would also say that as time is progressing, we are starting to see certain representations. Remember, there was a time when people would say that the Hindi movie industry doesn't have anyone from UP or Bihar. So a lot of stars that were coming from Punjab, because a lot of work was being done by writers and people who were, and literary people who were doing a lot of Urdu work. So, but then you get your Amitabh Bachchan, you get your Shatrughan Sinha, and from these states too. So I think that slowly but surely it will happen. It will take a lot of time, and I think it will leave many of us very disappointed in how slowly it is happening. But I like to hope that that's going to happen. But there's one thing else that is happening, and that I think that I'm very hopeful about, and that is that with a lot of alternative media channels, with and social media, people have the scope for for sharing their voices, for sharing their talent, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's YouTube. TikTok was a big medium. Now it's no more there in India. So and I see a lot of talent coming out and getting noticed through these channels. So I see artists from Mizoram, artists from Nagaland, artists from Assam, putting their work out, putting short movies out, and that was a great thing. And I hope that many other communities in the country get noticed or get and put their work out that way. Communities, I believe, should not. And see, there has been negligence, right? There has been biases. There has been issues of access. So for example, if a community doesn't have good school, if you don't know how to speak in English, that could change what you become, right? That could change where you get, what kind of jobs you get, what kind of institutes you get admitted to. So all those challenges are there, and I and coming from a Hindi medium education background, I do understand all those things. But I think that today we have more opportunities, and even though there are communities which do not have access to as much money or as much expertise or to industry or corporate the way other communities or other groups or people in some other states have. We have things are like we have more opportunities to get noticed, and and I think that's something that is positive also. And I think this is a very important thing, that we have to start holding our politicians accountable. Many of us have been see, I come from Uttar Pradesh. It's a state that has rarely, it's the most populated state. It's a very diverse state, but progress-wise, not a lot has been done. If you so a lot of people move outside when they get educated outside of the state to find jobs in other states or in other countries. The same is the stories with many other states. So I think we also have to hold our politicians accountable for that. But the major thing is that this is something which takes a bit of time, and but we don't have, but we have reasons to be hopeful, especially in the time of social media. So I hope that answers your question. It's not, a perfect answer, but I hope we do better,
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, Rudranaran Das has one question. Please, Rudra, ask direct to sir.
Thank you, Dr. Jatin. And Professor Srivastava, my question is that how do you explain the present geopolitical situation and especially the Ukraine crisis? This has been very seriously viewed by the global media in these days. So what is your take on the future of United Nations and how the American peoples are thinking about these and deals with these problems, and what should be the take of India as a journalist? What is your take, sir?
That's a very difficult question, Rudranaranji. But
yes, I
and though I'm not an expert on on these matters, on international relations, I would try to answer it as a citizen, right? As a citizen of the world and citizen of India. See, the world has become more multipolar, right? There are in 90s when I was growing up, there was only one major superpower, and that was United States. Now it seems that there are more. So there is United States and China and Russia, and they are not from the West, right? And they have things they want to do. China wants, they are interested in getting Taiwan. Russia, for different reasons, is interested in Ukraine. Russia, there are countries which also thinks, so like both China and Russia, that West is interfering in their matters. So, for example, United States, assurance to Taiwan that if China attacks them, they would support Taiwan, or NATO's, invitation, or the prospect of Ukraine becoming a part of NATO, that is seen by Russia as a challenge. So these are, so this is a world where there are more powers than 30 years ago. So one thing is there. Now, there was the international system, right? United Nations, which has been very, which has not been able to do much in these times. And, and the international system, I believe, and I believe what many of the, what has been the argument from China and even Russia coming, that when United States invaded Iraq, that was, not, so essentially that's when the international system started breaking up. So it's a very complicated scenario, but what it does in this whole system is to make United Nations more and more powerless and less relevant. that also creates a very dangerous situation, that that these powers believe that they can pursue their interests without further repercussions. These are all nuclear, nuclear powers, very strong nuclear powers, well armed. They have a lot of money, a lot of resources. So, and they have a lot of claims also, like, right? So Russia says that there are parts of Ukraine which should be with them. China says that there are different parts of the world, in South China Sea or Vietnam, even India, which they are very interested in and which should be their part. So if a superpower goes for something which they believe they should have, who is there to stop them? So that, I think that's their thinking, and that's the thinking of Russia, and that's the thinking of China. And see, China is not active yet on that front, so we really don't know how they are thinking. But they are not opposing Russia, or they are not, making some very clear statements. Countries like India, are in the middle. This is the time when people are being asked to choose their friends, and that is making things very difficult for countries like India. And I hope, and I don't know what decisions they will make, but let's see. But I think that the war is a bad idea, and it may destabilize if a wider armed conflict happens. It may destabilize the world economy. It may destabilize the world politics. Countries are still trying to recover from the pandemic. They don't have a lot of money. Unemployment and bad economy, low economic growth is a challenge across the world. So, this is not a good time. But see, there's no good time for a war. Like, a war should never be an option. So I don't think I have a better answer for you. But these are very complicated times. So
thank you for your answer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's really very wonderful and very engaging ideas said by you, sir. Thank you so much. And thank you, all of you, those who are watching us in particular YouTube and Facebook Live. And also a very warm good morning to USA and good night to India. Bye-bye. And I would like to invite Professor Das to go for a formal vote of thanks as well. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And looking for future engagement also. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jena, for inviting me again to conclude the session. I would like to thank everyone to help me putting this conference together. First of all, my sincere thanks to our speaker, Professor Jatin Srivastava ji. Thank you so much, sir, for joining World Human Sciences and Management Conference and sharing your ideas on the topic global politics and new media environment. And you share your ideas and different motives of media and a plethora of thoughts and very exquisitely. Thank you so much, sir, for joining with us. Definitely your deliberation will help our audience, our students, and specifically our researchers and journalism students are definitely very much interested to listen to you. Thank you so much for joining us from the United States. Now I'd like to acknowledge the institutional contributors here, in particular the Indian Institute of Management, Sambalpur, Central University of Odisha, and Ravenshaw University, and special mentions to all our patrons, Professor Sanjay Naik, Professor Mahadev Joyswal, and Professor Professor Sarat Kumar Palita for their institutional support, and thank you for our convener, Professor Chandi Prasad Nanda and Chowdat Panigrahi for their more motivations, and special mention to Director Center for Adivasi Research and Development, Dr. Vikram Kesari Jena, for organizing this Mapping Mind series to interact with the brilliant brains of world. And definitely this is a revolution of knowledge, and with the Center for Adivasi Research and Development is trying to gather all the research-oriented peoples speak much about the global problems and find the solutions of the global problems, specifically in the sector of tribal education, tribal development, in terms of their problems as concerned. Thank you so much, our entire technical team and our CAD members, Professor Sudarshan Misra, Professor Srinivasulu NS, Professor BC Das, Professor Loknath Misra, Shubham Das, Dr. Nupur Patnaik, Dr. Preeti Sriranjan, Dr. Neha Sharma, Dr. Shravan Bag, and Dr. Sam Kashyap for their contributions to make this conference a grand success. Thank you. Thank you all our audiences who are watching us in Facebook and YouTube live. And thank you all for being this conference a very grand success. Thank you, Professor Srivastava, for joining us. Namaste, sir.
Namaste, sir.
The meeting is concluded.